Well met. This has been Brode, and you're watching Born to be
Cosmo.
Oh, snap.
Cosmo.
Welcome to Born to be Cosmo, the podcast where we talk about all things Marvel Snap twice a month on our regularly scheduled date and time, Saturday for once. So that's really awesome. And I think this is a really good time to have a little chat about our favorite game. We've just had a pretty significant, at least in size, number of cards changed. OTA update, clientless update, where balance changes are often targeted. Like odd, lame duck period, but I think there's a lot to talk about. And here to discuss this with me are two of my favorite people, NateWolfe and ZombiesGoNomNom. Welcome, guys.
Hey, everybody. How's it going?
Hey, I'm excited to talk some Snap. We got some cool stuff.
Yeah, we do. It's a big week. So, well, with between the changes and then all the new stuff coming out. So, yeah, great time.
So prior to Thursday, through the engagement that Snap does on their official Discord, some hints about what would be included in the OTA update were dropped. Notably, it was suggested that a fairly significant change would be made to Destroy because the power level of that deck was too high post-Blob nerf. And then we got the OTA and we were looking for that nerf, which got leaked allegedly on the website for like 2 seconds, but I guess for reasons that have not yet been made clear to us, the Venom change, which there was no Venom change, didn't come. Also, there was an expected Elsa buff for the Elsa enjoyers out there, such as myself, that were disappointed to see that there was no Elsa update in the OTA and would likely come in a later update. Potentially, maybe the not the next patch because it's locked for a while, but the next OTA. So it was a bit of a head scratcher. But why don't we just get into it? We could just quickly go through our thoughts on the changes and then maybe talk a little bit about the post OTA meta.
Yeah. All right, sounds good. Well, I'm just going to go through them in order here, and thank you to SnapZone for the graphic that we borrowed. So first up is Luke Cage.
Yeah, so Luke Cage went from a 2/3, could only affect one lane. Cards cannot have their power reduced, and it was changed to a 3/4, and its global effect has been restored.
I'm not surprised at all. It was only a matter of time, I think, because they could.
He was bad.
Well, he was terrible, and I'm sure they
really
looked at
bad.
their internal metrics and just saw the play rate like plummet. I mean,
They said he was bad in Cerebro 3. That's how you know something's really when I mean Cerebro 3 players I think are their feathers were ruffled a little bit still losing him, but according to what they said in the notes, they said he was even underperforming in Cerebro 3. And that's how you know this card was really sent out to pasture. And now, well, global effect is back. He's a bigger body. They said they don't like global effects on those 2-drops, so I think this didn't really surprise anyone. I've seen a little bit more Luke Cage, mainly people testing out what's her name?
Hazmat, yeah.
Hazmat, yeah, I couldn't think of it. Hazmat decks, and some people have done kind of all right with it. It's kind of cute. I like this because I'm a Man-Thing enjoyer, and Luke Cage having to go in the Man-Thing lane to like work was really not great. So I kind of like this. I've also seen a few high evos playing it. I guess it's like mirror tech, but nothing too crazy here. It's not like you're going to just jam Luke Cage into a bunch of decks because mainly when he was really popular, Shadow King and Scalers were really popular, and that's not really the case anymore. Shadow King's still little common, but not nearly as much anymore, and Scalers not at all. Scalers have been just kind of wiped off the face of the planet, so you don't really need Luke Cage as much to protect against Scalers. It feels like it's more high evo anti-tech right now, kind of.
Yeah.
So when I saw this change, I thought, okay, whatever. But going from a 2 to a 3 is notable. And I wonder if Elsa will go through a similar metamorphosis to get their global ability restored. So I guess we'll find out soon enough. It's a lot harder to play a 3-drop than a 2-drop. for a lot of different reasons. But you know,
Especially with Elsa. Elsa, like one of Elsa's biggest strengths is like buffing up Kitty, right? So having
Yeah.
that one more energy to weave in a Kitty is pretty important. I did wonder though, do you think if Elsa was a 3/4, let's say 3/3, 3/4, whatever, with her original effect, so all lanes +3, would she be balanced, broken, or like not even that good? I'm not really sure. But I think that could be potentially interesting, though I do kind of hope they keep her a 2-drop and just give multi-lane functionality back, because I think the idea that you can't have any 2-drops affect all lanes is silly. I get it for like defensive tech like Luke Cage, but Elsa wasn't really doing very much. Like, it requires so much investment to get into filling 3 lanes that it was nice there was a little payoff. The payoff wasn't even that good when it was only +2. So I don't know what they do with the card, but I'm not even sure if OG Elsa as a 3-drop would be busted or not.
Well, the fact that we're talking about Elsa whilst Luke Cage is on the screen is probably our collective thoughts on that. I have seen more Luke Cage played, and I imagine that we'll continue to see it as a tech choice if Evo gets popular. People just like running things like Luke Cage because they've had a bad experience against it. So you'll see a maybe a disproportionate amount of a card like Luke Cage if certain strategies get popular. But I don't know. I feel like this is a change for the sake of changing things again. Like Luke Cage was maybe a little strong as a 2-drop, but you know the fact that the cards are constantly changing, I find it a bit jarring. You know, it's like there are some clear balance outliers that I'm really happy to see get modified, relatively quickly compared to what we had, say, a year ago. But the change for the sake of change, I think that a lot of people like that, but you know, I don't know. I think it's maybe gotten a bit much for my taste over the last couple of months, the rate with which cards change. So
I
we'll see
agree.
how long this change sticks for, and you know. Yeah.
It's difficult sometimes for me to, like, I've had to scale back to playing a little bit more casually just over the past week, and I sometimes, like, I can't remember how much the cards cost anymore because they change, and like
Catches you off guard, right?
it does, and even the stupid Shang-Chi change like messed me up for a couple of weeks.
Yeah, I think that got everybody at some point, like going to use Shang on a 9 and it doesn't work. And yeah,
Yep.
and I especially, that's got to be, I wonder how that feels as a more casual player, because we're all pretty involved, right? Like we keep up with the game. But imagine someone who, doesn't really pay attention to that stuff very much. Yeah, you get the little pop-up, but I feel like it definitely has to like take you by surprise. And also goes back to the whole thing where I think it like contrasts with the feeling of wanting to get invested in particular cards when you don't know. The only thing that's certain is uncertainty if your card will stay the same or not. Because even like non-meta cards, we're seeing a bunch of non-meta cards in this update get changed, kind of some in the hope of making them better, and others pretty much just to experiment with a different stat line, which I don't think it's the worst thing in the world to do if you don't have another change lined up, but it is a bit of a feels bad for the folks who there are people out there who liked these original cards even if they were never the star of the show. So it's a little bit sad for those folks.
They do this like change for the sake of change, and I'm not a big fan of that. Like, I mean, I know there's a handful of cards that just don't see play. Cough 2099 cough, but like it is a little bit jarring as well when I think the idea is like, hey, I'm gonna get this card, or maybe I'm not gonna get this card based on whether it's gonna change later, right? Like,
yeah, you kind of have to do that now, right? Like that's kind of what I've started recommending people is like, it's so hard to predict things. You can't really be like, oh, this card's really OP, you should buy it, because if it's really, really OP, it's probably going to get nerfed, and you don't know how heavy that nerf is going to be. Or if a card's underpowered, I think this is the more relevant one. It used to be, well, you would just tell people not to buy it and wait for it to drop in series or wait for it to show up again. And now they've been more regularly buffing them, which is good. But as we've talked about before, it clashes with the spotlight system a bit, where it's like, it sucks if you pass on Hercules and then he becomes a 4/7, even though he's still not very good.
Right.
But it's like it gives you a little bit of like, oh, maybe I would have liked him as a 4/7. I wish we could line up those things, but I don't think that's ever really going to happen because they need the data to actually do whatever adjustments they do.
Yeah, Gladiator is a good example of where this impacted my experience directly, right? Gladiator released as a 3/7. It was a pretty safe pass. And, then Gladiator got buffed to a 3/8, but in conjunction with that, started to see play in a lot of decks as a staple. And I wanted to play those decks. I wanted to play with the card. I had to spend 6,000 tokens, but I knew it was coming back in February. So the more economic choice would be to wait. And so I'm waiting, and I'm constantly having to like find a substitution or just not play a deck as a result of that. So that lack of agency, it can be a bit difficult at times, and it's been a little frustrating. And I think that as you have as you're less invested financially in the game, that gap, that delta of cards that you get and cards you pass will be a greater number, and you will experience that that fear of missing out more acutely. And that's kind of the whole model. FOMO,
Yeah.
fear of missing out. Just it kind of sucks when you miss out.
Yep. Well,
Yeah.
Let's talk about this like massive destroy.
Yeah,
buffer.
this next change was described as the change to balance destroy, to bring down the power level a little bit. And we were speculating what that card would be. No one guessed Hulkbuster, going from a 3/5 to a 2/3. Initial reaction to this change was, huh? And that this actually may make the card better in the deck, not worse. I don't know if that's true. I'm not really, I don't play much Destroy, but I do think Hulkbuster in general as a 2/3 is a lot more interesting as a card in a vacuum than a 3/5. And I don't know. I did my Infinite Conquest run a couple days ago, and I was matched against a Destroy, and they were running 2/3 Hulkbuster, and the deck seemed like it was doing what it always did, brushing the change off. Have you guys played any Destroy with Hulkbuster since the change?
I've seen it. I've seen people play it, and it's funny because we all talked about the like, oh, you can now go Deadpool into Hulkbuster on 2. I think I've only ever seen that happen one time so far. It hasn't happened much. I have seen more often they'll get the Hulkbuster late, and then they'll try and pair it on Deadpool in a lane where there's something already there, and then it backfires. So that's been kind of funny. Weirdly enough, I have seen like notably less Destroy after this change, which I'm very surprised about because obviously this doesn't feel like a big nerf to Destroy, if one at all. But I feel like I've seen less Destroy, even though most of the Destroys I was seeing didn't have Hulkbuster to begin with. But according to their stats, that was the best version across, the larger player base. So kind of interesting. I did see a few disgruntled move players though, because this made move like the basic move deck a lot worse apparently. Like I thought it might be okay, but losing those 2 extra points on your multiple men is really big. It now goes to a 2/6 instead of a 2/8 for moving it around. And yeah, it's a shame. I kind of feel bad for the move people because that deck was never really dominant, but some people really liked it. And this Hulkbuster change, it feels like that was some collateral damage there.
I played both. And that was my feeling as well, really, is I played Destroy and it felt the same. And you can get giant Deadpools, like, pretty much no matter what. I mean, it's a little draw dependent, but, like, whatever. But I played safeties, multiple man Phoenix Force type thing, and yeah, it felt significantly weaker.
It's still seeing quite a bit of play. So since the OTA on Untapped pre-infinite games, it accounts for 8.1% of games logged. Post-infinite is 6.5%, which is a little lower post-infinite. It's about the same pre-infinite. And in Conquest, in Infinity Conquest, since it's Infinity Conquest week, 10.3%, the most popular deck in Infinity Conquest since February 1st. So you not saying destroy zombies looks like variance.
Yeah, it could be. Very well could be variance.
And it still has a pretty respectable win rate as the best performing deck in the meta, allegedly. It had a softer win rate than some other meta tyrants from meta games past. People like destroy, and they're still playing it, and it seems to be trucking along. Although I would argue that as far as meta leaders go, destroy seems to be one of the less offensive decks that we've had over the months. So I'm not sure that the top dog has to always be hit. There's always going to be a top dog. We could do
Yeah.
far worse than this, right?
I think that's been a commonly shared sentiment where if destroy is one of or the best deck in the game, that usually is a better thing than a worse thing, because that means there's a lot of other stuff that can compete. And generally that's been true. I think Conquest, there's been some like discussion about like the polarization in Conquest, and I think that's fairly true. I think that's just kind of a Conquest issue in general, and that's why I found personally ladder has been a lot more fun for me. I avoided ladder for a very long time the last couple months because Loki was on top, and most of the people in the top 1000 were playing Loki, and I don't like playing against Loki. It's not
It
a
has
fun
been said.
experience to me. So I avoided ladder like the plague because it was not fun for me, and I saw a bit more variety in Conquest back then. And now it's kind of the opposite, where I still see variety in Conquest, but you feel those unfavorable matchups so much more painfully in Conquest. Because like for example, I was doing the Infinity run the other night, and I was playing my 2099 moving deck, and I really liked the deck, and I got to game 5, and then I ran into a Nihilist Darkhawk, and that was like I think as close to a hard counter as you could get. Because they put out a larger points than me. And outside of like shanging the Sentry or the Darkhawk, you don't really have a way of interacting with the things that they're doing, like their demons or sending you over the void. So they just have more stats without being vulnerable to tech, and they're not quite as vulnerable to what my deck tries to do, which is move the opponent's cards around the board and kind of keep them guessing on where you're playing for. So that felt really bad. You make it all the way to game 5, and then you run into an unfavorable and you have to bash your head against a wall for like 20-30 minutes. Just that uphill battle. And I think that's just a thing in Conquest, and I've seen some people discuss trying to like find a way to make that better, but I'm not really sure there is a way to make that better. I think that's just kind of part of what comes along with Conquest is like you're going to get unfavorables sometimes, and it's not very fun when you have to face them over and over and over again.
My hot take is that Conquest would be better if it was an 8 cube game instead of 10, just so that you don't have that residual 2, and it would make the set shorter. I think that for me, I think I don't enjoy Conquest, so probably my suggestions are unhelpful. But it's a lot of snap, and it can be mentally taxing, playing into an unfavorable for 7 to 10 rounds, only to lose the game you were probably going to lose anyhow, but going far deeper in the run than you had any business. But the outcome is still zero sum. It's a win or a loss. I usually end up doing one Infinite Conquest run a season, and I don't have much more patience than that. And I think you're kind of articulating the same thing, although perhaps your experience zombies is a little bit more meta dependent. But yeah, with ladder, you get unfavorable, you retreat, you get into the next game. It's a lot more of a one and done. So
easier to avoid tilt too. Like I think especially against destroy and stuff or any deck, when like your opponent gets favorable locations like a few games in a row, it's really easy to get tilted, and tilt is really, really punishing in this game. And I find, when on ladder, if you're not running into the same stuff, which right now there's a lot of variety, I think it's easier to avoid that kind of tilt, because if something goes wrong, you're like, oh, I lose a cube or I lose 2 cubes. But when you have something go wrong like 3 times and it's all in their favor and you're down a bunch, and it starts to get frustrating. And then usually when people are frustrated, they don't play as well. So it's I think it's kind of like a snowball in Conquest. When things start to go wrong, they just get worse and worse, because it's very important to be like mindful when you're snapping and retreating in Conquest. And I think as, even tilt aside, just like when you're 5 games into Infinity Conquest, that's a ton of snap. And especially if you're playing a deck that requires more thought, it's like it's tiring. Like I don't know if I would take a Werewolf by Night deck into Infinity Conquest, because if I made it to game 5, I'm pretty sure I would be like mentally exhausted by the time I got there.
Yeah, I agree. So moving on with the OTA changes, if the move players were unhappy about the Hulkbuster change, surely the next change to Heimdall was what classic move gamers were clamoring for. Now having the superior 6/9 stat line, nice, instead of 6/8.
Yeah, this was. I mean, it's
Is-
fine, right? Like you still Heimdall move into lose.
Yeah,
It's
that's the classic like snap line. It's like Heimdall into lose, and I don't know 6/9. It can't get shanked, so that's good.
yeah,
But
it doesn't fix the problem like traditional move has, right? Which is, people have brought this up, like destroy and discard both have like a late game payoff for doing their thing through the whole game, and move just doesn't have that. Like Heimdall, he's dependent on you having played things earlier, and when you've played those things earlier, it's very clear what's going to happen with them a lot of the time. And so I think move really needs some kind of like big, if they clearly want to make more expensive move cards a thing, but I think for that to succeed, you need a big payoff move card, and you also need a
like old
cheaper
Elsa.
move card. Well, no, I mean more like Null or Apocalypse. Like, I think you need a
Right.
big finisher move card, but I think you also need something like Morbius, where it's like the difference between Morbius and Craven is the fact that the Craven has to be on the board immediately for its effect to work, whereas Morbius, if you get him later, he has, he gets the benefit for you having done the thing throughout the game. I think move would really benefit a lot from a card like that. It just doesn't really, it lacks those kind of cards. So one or both of those cards, I think, would go a long way to fixing this. Like, I like the idea of there being higher costed move cards rather than like traditionally move is revolved around cards that cost 3 or less. Like, I like what they're trying to do, but it's not good enough right now. They need
It's
to
funny. Move has so many scalers: Human Torch, Vulture, Craven, but they all kind of Dagger. They're kind of like, they're very conditional or circumstantial. Like
you can say bad. It's okay.
Yeah, and they have board space
Man.
issues too. Like the
Yeah.
board space, when you play all these cheap cards, your board gets filled up, and that messes with something like Heimdall and in general your ability to move cards around the board. So it's like, it's in a way, high cost move cards could be nice because you're not filling up as much of your board, so there's more space for you to do the move thing. But I don't know. It's just, this isn't it.
Well, speaking of high cost move cards, Nate and I have
yeah.
like we were in
That's
synchronicity there. Go for it, Nate.
I was gonna say, speaking of high cost move cards, here you go, Spider-Man 2099.
You swing it in.
Finally, the Spider-Man 2099 buff that everyone was waiting for.
It only took like 8 months.
Didn't
But
they
you've been-
say
you've
they
been
were
playing-
happy with where he was at or something like that?
That
A
was
long time
while
ago they did.
Yeah.
Yeah. But they finally admit that he's not very good. And the funny thing about their notes here was like, they basically were like, yeah, we don't know what we want to do with this card yet, so we're just going to change his numbers a bit and see how that goes. But they made it pretty clear this isn't probably the final form. It's just experimenting with they basically, this and the other card we'll talk about, Ghost, they're just kind of experimenting with what this card does at this different stat range. But I think for both of them, they said that we're interested in doing something different with these cards or something else with these cards. We don't really know what we want that to be. Like, we don't know what they're not decided on what they want to do with the card. So in the meantime, it gets a change. And this is another one where I think a few move people were a little sad, although I don't think he was really seeing play there. I feel like I'm like the one person who's drinking the 2099 Kool-Aid and has actually been enjoying playing the card a lot more as a 5/9 in that move your opponent's card kind of deck, because 5/9s are good. It's like the most premium stat line for a 5-drop that can't get Shang-Chi'd. Yeah, killing an opponent's thing is also pretty good, turns out. So I know there's randomness to it and whatnot, but I've actually really liked this change, and I'm going to be kind of sad if they change it again, which I'm sure they probably will because most people didn't really like the change. But hey, I'm going to get my time out of it. It took them 8 months or whatever for the first change. It'll probably take them a while for the next one.
Yeah. Yeah, Ghost, the next card that was changed. This was the one that I was most excited for. It went from a 1/2 stat line to a 3/5. And I was excited for this change because in some of the fringe decks that I like to play, I thought that it could slot in. Interestingly enough, I did see quite a few people that I interacted with or interact with regularly on Twitter kind of say that they were unhappy about the change because the decks that they liked Ghost in, such as decks that rely on Valkyrie or Spectrum, possibly would not appreciate the extra cost. And I get it, right? It's that change for the sake of change thing. But I think that Ghost as a 3/5 is a better card in a vacuum, and that's mainly because it can't be Killmongered, and so now you can play Ghost alongside Killmonger, which can be quite powerful, whereas before that was a little bit trickier. So yeah, Control Sarah shells have been kind of where people have been experimenting with Ghost, and if you avoid Alioth, it's been really good.
Yeah, specifically the Beta Ray build decks, I think, are the main deck that really like this card. 3/5 is a lot of stats. Like, the difference between a 1/2 and a 3/5 is really, really big. 3/5 is premium, 1/2 is like bare minimum and has a generally low impact on the game. Also, like you mentioned, might not stick around because of Killmonger. 3/5 is like really effective stats for the cost. Which is exactly what the Beta Ray build decks like doing. And like the biggest issue those decks have had, I feel like, is you get your Jane and you draw your hammers and then you're ready to go, but you often take priority and then you lose the lane to Shang and you're sad. This fixes that, right? Like you play Ghost and now all of a sudden you're not having to worry about a Shadow King or a Shang-Chi making your fun hammer guys not exist anymore. So I really like that. And especially a lot of the Beta Ray build decks have actually had, some reactive tools of their own, namely Shang. But also sometimes, deploying like a surprise Miss Marvel or whatever is also good because then your opponent can't like react with it and they aren't necessarily expecting the power bump. So I think the new home for Ghost is niche, but specifically in that deck, it seems like a really, really big boost. And yeah, I like it. Seems good.
So those were the changes. Despite it being a quiet OTA week, there is still quite a bit done, and it will be interesting to see what the lasting impact is on the metagame with these changes. Yeah. So
Yeah.
kind of moving on from the balance changes, this is the last week of the season, and that is Infinity Conquest week, and I imagine that people are either doing their monthly infinite conquest runs, or some people are grinding it really hard. As I mentioned earlier, I do one a month, and I usually don't win because it's 5 games in a row that you have to win. But this month, I skillfully queued into 5 soft matches and easily got the prize, and they were very soft matches. It was really laid back. It wasn't a sweat fest at all. And I think that, yeah, the matches were a little soft, but I think the big part here was, and you basically said this earlier, I just picked a deck that I'm really familiar with. It's very good. I'm comfortable with. It's Thanos Lockjaw. Balanced now because of Blob, but still probably one of the best decks in the current metagame. And then after I got it done, so too did you with the same deck, Zombies. So we're
Thanos Lockjaw, really good. It's a good deck, but it's also the best thing about it, I think, is that it's very easy to learn. and the snaps and retreats and like doing the math is kind of the most straightforward out of most of the decks in the game. Obviously, there's RNG with the Lockjaw and stuff, but I feel like there are a few decks in the game where it is very clear to me, most games, that, hey, I have a good chance of winning this. I have very little chance of winning this, and how you can kind of capitalize on that. So I think if you're looking for a deck for Infinity Conquest, you really cannot go wrong with it, because it can react with Shang-Chi. It cheats out mana for bigger things, so it can outstat opponents, and it has a way of nullifying your opponent's interaction with things like Kyra and Leech. It kind of just covers all the bases. It's very hard to think of another deck that feels as well-rounded as this type of shell.
Yeah, my biggest complaint with Thanos decks over the last couple of months was that, oftentimes it was just an existing deck with Thanos in it that made it worse. Destroy is a great example of that. And there were other shells as well. With the release of Beta Ray Bill, a lot of people have been experimenting with more classic Jane Jaw, Lockjaw, and this version feels better than the non-Thanos version. And I think that that's the big part, is because of the toolbox cards it allows you to run that you really appreciate in Conquest. Having the Reality Stone to turn off a Limbo, huge. Having Kyra to nullify Shang-Chi, if your opponent has that, you can even use it, to try and bait out a Shang-Chi. So there's that kind of even though this is a deck that puts a lot of points on the board, it has a lot of reactive style tools that generally you can't fit in a deck like this. That's really, really good. So you've got Shang, you've got the stones, you've got Kyra, and there's even more stuff coming. It's funny that the card in this deck that I feel is the weakest is the Scar, but we just run it because we don't really have a better option at present. I mean, this is the list. I tried running it earlier in the month with She-Hulk over Devil Dino when the Blob nerf occurred, but Devil Dino's so good in these Thanos lists because it's for a 5, it generally is well above 10. And for people
that's
who are
good with
playing,
Scar too, right? Because it helps you if you ramp out your Dino on 4, you can play. The big benefit of Scar is the fact that he goes really well with the Lockjaw plan. Because one, if he comes out of Lockjaw, you're happy. You didn't have to pay the cost for him. He's a 6-drop that doesn't always cost 6, so he gets the benefit of Kyra protection. There's also a bug with Wave right now, which can further reduce his cost through the Wave effect, which is actually a relevant buff.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's pretty. So that's a pretty big one. Like, it's weird. Like, he's in a weird spot, but he just fits what this deck is trying to do. The big thing being able to play him after you. Let's say you play your Lockjaw and you get something big out of it on turn 4, or even sometimes turn 3. Usually turn 4 though. You get something big out of the Lockjaw, then you can play Scar on turn 4 or turn 5, and you can play a stone alongside it into the Lockjaw. And I think that's kind of his biggest strength, is the fact that you can get down a big threat while also pumping your Lockjaw lane.
Yep.
Yeah, two things that I think bear mentioning with this deck. Kyra is really good, like really, really, really good. It's one of those cards that I think, if it's not already a problem, will probably be one, just because of the space it occupies, even though it's a 3-drop. There are so many games that just were won because Shang and Kyra flipped on the same turn, and it just nullified the Shang, right? Shang is an expensive card, and you kind of lose that turn. I see some versions cutting Leech, and I don't know. I wouldn't cut Leech. I mean, I
He's just so
basically,
good.
yeah. When I started my run, the reason that I decided to play this deck was because Leech just answers so many things that this deck struggles with, and because it has so many chunky big boys, it can eat the tempo loss. It can be tricky sometimes. It doesn't take it as cleanly as the Evo decks do, but it's still really worth running.
Yeah.
So I like this deck. If I wanted to do something different for Infinite Conquest, I think like a Sarah Tech deck, or like the Beta Ray Bill Thor deck that's running Ghost, and like the reactive package with Shang and Enchantress. I mean, basically, if you're not putting a lot of points on the board, you need to have a reactive game plan. You need to be able to beat a deck like the Tribunal combo deck, whether it's through disruption or points, because if you don't have an answer for one of these decks, and this is the polarizing experience that you were talking about, Zombies, your run's over. Like if you're playing a deck like I don't know, like Monkey Bounce, just as an example, and you queue into Tribunal, you're probably, I mean, anything's
You're
possible.
gonna have a bad time.
You're gonna have a bad time because you
Pizza
don't have
when you
the
should have French
answer.
fried.
Yeah, and I feel that's the polarization in Conquest. And some folks had some suggestions about how to make Conquest better, and I don't know, things like a sideboard or being able to swap decks. I don't know if those would make Conquest better, but I know what it would do. It would make it longer. And when when an Infinite Conquest run can take 2.5 hours, from start to finish, anything to make that longer would be, for me, a feels bad. I already feel like it's too much Snap for me. Maybe I'm in the minority, but I don't know about you guys. What do you think about sideboards or deck swapping in Conquest?
Yeah, I agree. I don't like the idea of sideboards at all. Like, I think people, especially players who have played Magic, get like have a very skewed idea of sideboards being a positive thing. When I played Magic the Gathering, here's the experience with sideboards. One, they absolutely make the game take longer, like significantly longer.
Yep.
It's a little bit better in like digital than it would be in paper, but also the thing with Magic is you have a 60 card deck. The odds of you seeing your sideboard tools are generally smaller than in a game like Snap. You'd obviously have a smaller sideboard, but I really dislike the idea of any side decking in a game with 12 card decks. Like, that one card is such a difference maker. It also means that no deck ever has to choose to put tech in their main deck. You could just not run tech cards, and just everyone's sideboard is full of the tech cards. And then it just becomes a game of, well, I can swap in these tech cards, but then again, like I've seen in Magic a bunch, a good player will swap out the things that they're expecting you to tech against. So maybe you swap in Shang-Chi and they swap out one or two of their big threats. So your tech, and then it just feels like I'm flipping a coin. Like I'm deciding how deep in the tank I want to go if I think my opponent is going to do a move like that. And then if it backfires and you take it out and then they don't swap in the tech, it's like, was that really a big, clever read, or was I kind of flipping a coin on, is my opponent going to do this or not? And I just don't like the idea. I don't think they would ever implement it, because it would require additional UI. It would make the games longer. Again, 12 card decks. I think sideboards are a really, really bad idea in Marvel Snap.
Yeah, I agree. I don't have anything else to contribute, but I totally agree. I'm not a fan, and there's already enough like tech W. I think
tech defines the meta right now. Like, do we really want all sideboards aren't going to? I think some people that I've seen expressed interest in it, I get where they're coming from, because some decks feel like you can't naturally include tech cards because you have so many other cards you want to include, and so they feel bad when like they lose because they don't have the tech. But I think that's just the nature of Conquest. Like, Conquest feels worse than Ladder when you run into the thing that you can't answer properly, because you're locked into having to face it over and over. And truthfully, that's why I think the Ladder format is the better way to enjoy Snap generally.
Yes.
Because it just isn't as frustrating. I think the frustrating thing here is that after you get Infinite, there's no reward for doing Ladder. So it feels like if you're someone who wants to get rewarded, and the rewards are minor, although not all minor. Like some of the stuff you get from the Conquest shop is really nice. The variants, there's some currency, that stuff's valuable. but it's not too hard to get a hold of that. After that, it's just boosters. But if you've played the game a long time and you like splitting cards, boosters have a tangible value. Like there are cards I wish I could keep splitting, and I just don't have the boosters for, in spite of playing them a lot.
I saw you get all those lockjaw ones last night. It was like,
yeah, that was exciting. Like it's rare because there's so many cards you can get random boosters for. But when I actually get 155 boosters for a card I like splitting but keep running out, I'm happy about that. Like it's a very nice bonus. I feel rewarded for getting something out of playing, and I just don't get that out of ladder. I don't really think they necessarily should give some big reward for climbing the ladder, because I don't know. I think infinite is enough of a reward for most people, but it would be nice if there was some reason, some like small, even if it was just boosters. I don't want anything really exclusive or whatever. I just think it would be nice if there was something to compete with Conquest in terms of getting additional boosters on ladder, so that way people could feel like they could just play whichever mode they like more, without being like, oh, I'm going to play Conquest because Conquest gives me rewards after Infinite and ladder doesn't. So even something that simple, where if they found a way to implement like extra boosters on post Infinite ladder, I think would go a long way with just letting people play the game the way they want to play the game more.
Well, one suggestion I heard about Conquest, I don't remember who made it. Maybe it was KM Best. I can't recall. But it was, we can make Conquest better by eliminating the proving grounds.
Well, no, he said get rid of silver, I think, not the proving grounds. And I kind of agree with that. Like taking one tier out of it, I think would go a long way to reducing kind of the grind. But I don't think that fixes the issues we've talked about in terms of things being more polarized in Conquest. It's just like tech matters. It turns out tech matters a lot more when you are running into the same deck over and over, because when you have that silver bullet, it's going to be good every game, and that's just kind of the nature of Conquest. And I don't think there really is a way to fix that without completely like reinventing the mode, which I don't think they want to put the resources into. I think they'd rather just work on another new mode that gives you a different experience than that.
Right, like the one in concept right now that we'll maybe find out about later in the year. So that's kind of, I guess, our thoughts on Conquest. We don't really want to see things that would make it be grindier or longer.
Definitely not.
I think what I hear people saying is that they want to feel like they have more agency over their game, without having to like main deck the tech cards. Tech cards are so good that the best decks run them straight in line, and maybe that's another potential area that would warrant discussion. But
well, we saw what happened the last time they wanted to make tech less prominent in the meta, and that was Loki. So tech may not be perfect, but if I'm in a world where I have to choose between tech cards being prominent and swingy versus Loki being the best deck in the game, I know which world I'm picking, and it's not the Loki one.
I probably would be inclined to agree. I wouldn't want to go back to that game state.
Yeah.
But speaking of game state, as I try to inject another segue, we're about to enter into a new season, and there are a lot of interesting cards coming this season, which is a break from this past season where maybe the cards weren't as interesting as maybe we've become accustomed to. So this theme for the upcoming month is Thanos's generals and lieutenants. The Black Order, is it called?
Yep.
Yes.
And I wasn't really familiar with what this was until I watched the always fantastic preview video that Second Order puts out for the upcoming season. And I think this looks like a pretty exciting month. It's certainly going to change the meta. We oftentimes are pretty critical about the game economy, and I think justifiably so. But perhaps one area that we haven't really focused on that we can touch on right now is how great the battle passes are in terms of value and impact. you know, it's the best thing you can buy.
Oh, yeah.
And the variants that are included, like the cosmetics that are included, I think are some of the best cosmetics going back several months.
Oh man.
Yeah, they've
It's
been doing really well. They haven't. I feel like they haven't missed on a pass. You can argue that some of the cards are better than other ones. Some were OP. More recently, they've been a little bit better about not having the battle pass card be broken in half with Shaw and Scar. And I think Swan is going to be a good example of a card that is kind of in the Scar territory, except maybe a little more flexibility in the decks that run it.
This battle pass is amazing. The art, the
The art
alternate
is incredible.
so good.
It's so good. The Fiona death is one people have wanted for a while. Like, I don't think I've seen anyone say, "Oh man, I really didn't like the variants and stuff in the past." Like for a while, like it's
the
just been
card
great.
backs are cool.
The
Black
Thanos one for the Thanos deck. I got a Thanos title and a Thanos avatar. Now I just need the Thanos card back.
And I like the pass variant for Black Swan. So yeah, let's have a look at the cards. But yeah, I just wanted to kind of just point that out, that the battle pass, if you're, you know, a free to play player and you're thinking about where you might want to spend something, you
It's
know,
always the pass. Pass is,
yeah,
if you spend any money in Marvel Snap, your best move is always to become a pass only player. You don't need to buy every pass, because obviously that can add up. But if you are looking to invest a small amount of money for having a better experience or having more stuff to mess around with, like the pass is the way you go.
Yep.
Yeah, and so the card this month that's included in the pass is Black Swan, and Black Swan is a pretty exciting card. It originally was a 2/3, and that's what we have on the screen, but it was recently changed to a 3/5, and they did this to make the card better. They said that in internal testing, Black Swan underperformed as a 2/3, which is interesting.
Mhm.
And what Black Swan does is it, as an on reveal, makes your 1-cost cards cost 0 next turn, which, at least to me, seems like a very impactful ability. So you said this would be on Scar level. I don't know. I think that this, to me, like my
I think it's better
reaction.
than Scar. I just mean it's not Miss Marvel or Loki. It's not like crazy broken, but I think it's
Right.
better than the last like 2 months. It's a good card, and 3/5 makes it again a lot better. That 3/5 stat line is premium. I'm glad they kind of came to that realization before it released, instead of releasing it as a 2/3 and then buffing it. So yeah, 3/5 Black Swan seems pretty sweet. And a big part of that is it also helps you like curve out more, especially with some of the other cards coming this month, like Cull Obsidian, which is the 4-drop. So you can play a 3/5 into a 4/10, and it's a really good curve. Like that's
Oh, we got to talk
Yeah.
about how
stats.
Cull works too. But
Yes.
we'll do it
Yeah.
Super Giants next. But you had found something out about that card that makes it better, so we should let everyone know.
But yeah, Black Swan, it's a Thanos card, right? You put this in your Thanos decks, your Thanos Zoo, your Thanos Lockjaw. You're real happy with it, right? Because you get free stones, and anyone who was around during the Quinjet era of Thanos remembers how strong free stones are. They are very, very strong, and as someone who enjoys like Zoo style decks, I'm very excited for this card, because the biggest issue Zoo style decks have is, you have a bunch of cheap things, and then you have your things that buff them, right? Like Khazar and Blue Marvel. But the issue is sometimes in order to play those buff cards, you don't always have enough mana to play all the cheap things. Or maybe you're playing like an ongoing zoo, and there's like 1 or 2 stuck in your hand that you can't play with Spectrum on the final turn. This has a lot of potential to help fix those issues. So I really like the card. I think it's cool.
Yeah, and the Battle Pass variant that we have up on the screen is really awesome. So
Yeah, it's super cool.
So definitely a card that I'm looking forward to, that I'm excited about. And it plays in a variety of decks that I think I tend to enjoy. So yeah, looking forward to that.
Yep.
Now, Second Dinner has been releasing a new card alongside the Battle Pass card in the same week. and they are continuing that this month with Supergiant. Supergiant's an interesting one, and I think it's a card that a lot of people have been talking about for good reason because it has a very disruptive ability. So it is a it's a 4/6 now, correct? It's listed
No,
as-
this one's still 4/5.
It's still 4/5.
This
Okay,
one's still
sorry.
4/5.
Good. Thank you for correcting that. So it's a 4/5, and it's on reveal is that cards will not be revealed until next turn. So really, the idea
next turn, the cards played the turn after it is played won't be revealed until the end of the game. So you play Supergiant on 4. The cards you and your opponent play on 5 won't be flipped until the end of the game. Basically.
It's a Sarah killer.
Yeah, Sarah's the big one. It's a 5-drop killer, right?
Yeah,
Like
MODOK.
Sarah, MODOK, Jane, Legion, Leech. Yeah, Professor X. These are all the cards that, like, it's really seems to be designed to say, hey, you're trying to do some big swingy play or set yourself up on turn 5. Well, you're not going to be able to do that, or you're not going to get that effect off on turn 5 when you want it, which it's a neat space to explore. Like, I'm not sure if it's going to be good or not when it comes out. I do think it might be a good Conquest card because Sarah's so good in Conquest, having something like this to like limit what they're able to do. Like, if you're packing this and Mobius, like, Sarah's got to be kind of upset, right? So it's an interesting card. And one other neat application is, like, you play this in a Zabu Darkhawk deck, and you play this, let's say, on 3 or 4, whenever, and you can hide your Darkhawk, right? Sometimes you never really want to play the Darkhawk early, right? Because then they know where it is and they know they can Shang it. But if you hide it with Supergiant, they don't know what that card is. They don't know that's going to be your Darkhawk at the end of the game. So I kind of like that, as it's more of a niche application, but kind of an interesting one, or doubling up as another kind of invisible woman in the MODOK Hela style deck. So you play this on 4, you play MODOK on 5, so it doesn't discard your Hela. I think that's a bit niche because most of those have moved away from it, but there is something to be said for adding redundancy in combo decks. So maybe it's good enough.
Do you think that people are going to? Do you think this is going to make people rage against Goliath like they once did?
Yeah, 100%. People still hate Goliath. It's not popular. It's still pretty good. I think it's like it's performing fine, but it's really not that popular of a deck. But people still hate it as much as they always did, from my experience. And I think this card, all the Alioth enjoyers out there, they're ready for Supergiant. And I'm curious to see the kind of decks that make that work, right? Because for that to work, you need to take priority, right? So in order to play Supergiant, which is kind of a tempo loss, right? 4/5 isn't that great stats. And whatever you play on 5 is not going to impact the state of priority. So you have to be thinking, how do I guarantee I get priority in the first 3 turns of the game in order to make Supergiant into Alioth work? And I think that's going to be an interesting thing to experiment with. That's like a fun kind of build around where you take a deck. Because right now, I think a lot of the Alioth decks, they fight for prio, but like I don't think they're doing it especially hard compared to other decks. They often have like Doom as a backup and whatnot, and maybe they still will. But I don't know. I think it's going to be interesting to see if anyone comes up with a deck that really puts out a lot of early points so it can do the Supergiant Alioth shenanigans.
Well, that's going to be coming to a
Spotlights
token
Monday.
shop.
Yeah,
near you on
Tuesday, not Monday.
Depends where you are in this world, but yes, for us in North America, Tuesday, either afternoon or morning. So that'll be an interesting one. The following week after Supergiant, we have Cull Obsidian, which has a card that has changed quite a bit from the time that it was originally leaked. In its final form, it is now a 4/10 that must be played in a lane with a 1-drop, although notably, unlike Crossbones, where you have to be winning the lane before the turn starts in order to play Crossbones, you can play Cull Obsidian alongside a 1-drop at the same time. And so
that's really big. Like that, we thought it was going to work like Crossbones, where Crossbones you have to be winning the lane to play the card. we thought you wouldn't be able to sequence it with playing a 1-drop the same turn as Cull, and that was like a pretty big downside for him. And now the fact that you can play Black Swan, make your 1s free, and to play a 1 in a lane and play Cull in that same lane is really, really big. That's a huge boost for this card. I do low-key think he would have been better as a 4/9 because then he dodges Shang. But maybe they wanted there to be some, risk reward here, and that seems fine. I do wish he had an ongoing still. His old data mine version was probably way too strong, which was a 4/10 with ongoing, can't be destroyed, and had the same condition. And I don't think you really want to give that to a card like this. I think that would have been too strong. But I would have liked if they kept the ongoing for his effect. So ongoing, you can only play this where a 1-drop is. So that way you can buff him with Spectrum. I think it would have been cool if this card fit well into like a Spectrum style thing.
Yeah.
And I'm a little sad it doesn't, but it still seems really good. Generally, 4/10s are pretty good. I'm interested to see how the card does. It is worth noting this card initially data mined as a Series 4. In the preview video, it was Series 5. Actually, all the cards in the preview video were Series 5. It's been a while since we had a full Series 5 month. I think it's actually been a really long time, like a couple months.
Hopefully that was an error, but
yeah, I'm hoping it's
not
wrong. They
looking
haven't
good.
clarified, but there's a chance this might be a full Series 5 month, which would be kind of a bummer. I think people really appreciate the fact that they can normally pick up one of the cards of the month as a Series 4 for tokens, rather than having to rely on caches or 6K tokens, which, that's essentially 2 Series 4 cards, right? So kind of hoping that's wrong, but I guess we'll see. And the other thing that's relevant about this card getting a buff to 10 is Scar, right? While it may make it in Shang range, this is now a card that you can play to reduce your Scar, and that's pretty cool. Like if you play out this card early, let's say you use a Time Stone on turn 2, you play this card on turn 3, you can play Scar on turn 4. That's a lot of stats very early in the game. So it's very interesting. And I especially like the fact that you can do stuff like playing Black Swan into this, because then you can also like use your stones, whether you're just playing them out or maybe like dunking one of them way into the lockjaw or something.
Yeah, no, this is looking like a good card for Thanos and for any kind of flood or zoo deck that's running a lot of 1s, because Cull's a big boy. The next card is also pretty compelling, and it's Corvus Glaive. And what this card does is it is a 3/5 that when you play it as an on reveal, you discard 2 cards from your hand at random, a la Hellcow. But unlike Hellcow, this card gives you +1 energy. It ramps you, which seems like a pretty sweet payoff.
Mm-hmm.
Very powerful effect. Like they did clarify you do need to discard both cards to activate the condition, so you won't get a bonus if you only discard 1 card, which fringe thing, but you never know.
Yeah,
this was buffed though from a 3/4 to a 3/5. Again, 3/5, that kind of premium stat line. This seems like a really, really good Hela card. Like this seems really, really good for Hela.
It does everything that Hela wants.
Yeah, it makes your game plan better when you don't draw the Hela. Like if you need a backup, you play this on turn 3 or 4, and then you can actually play those 6 drops that are normally rotting away in your hand on turn 5. So that's pretty it's pretty handy. It also, like, having 2 things to discard is really nice in the early game. And being able to do that a turn sooner is really, really relevant. Because with something like Hellcow, the earliest you can do that is, turn 4 if you're actually paying for it, and it's not popping out of Lockjaw. So your odds of actually having the Hela in hand and it being a risk for you to discard are higher by the time turn 4 comes around. So the fact that you can rip this on turn 3 when, if Hela's not in your hand, there really isn't much risk at all, that seems pretty huge. That seems like a really big benefit, and maybe it makes playing some of your other cards a little bit more flexible. Like, maybe on your 4th turn, you can play like a Dracula and a Blade or something like that, or a Black Knight and a Sif. Or, well, I guess you could play those already on turn 4, but you get the idea. It's just more energy is always a good thing.
And this, just as an aside, this week, the third week of February, or the third week in the February season, looks like a very good week to use spotlight keys. So you get Corvus Glaive, Gladiator, and X23 are all included that week, if I'm not mistaken. So for those of us that passed on Gladiator, it's nice that, I guess, like, they could have paired Gladiator with any cards this month, but just that week in general seems, pretty
They're all
good.
really good cards, right?
Yeah,
Like
they're all
Corvus is
cards.
good, Gladiator's good, X23 is good. They're all like very important in the decks that run them.
Yeah, so that's going to be a good week for. It's not a hard week to recommend using keys for those that are always trying to get the most value out of their limited game resources. And finally, last but certainly not least, Proxima Midnight. So Proxima Midnight buffed from a 4/6 that we see on screen to now a 4/7. Basically, when discarded, will play to your lane that has the least amount of power, if I recall correctly. And this was a card that I kind of saw, and I was like, "Oh, that seems neat. Sure, whatever." But then in the preview video, they show Proxima Midnight hitting the board once it's discarded from hand, and just seeing like 7 kind of snap into a lane. No pun intended. Yeah, it's a lot of stats that you get for doing something that your deck wants to do anyways. So yeah, this looks like another really good card if you're playing, decks that discard, whether that's an Apocalypse deck, a Hela deck, or even some of these cheeky Black Bolt decks. Potentially could also benefit from Proxima, although generally that's targeted discard, so maybe I'm getting a bit ahead of myself there. But yeah, that said, 4/7 for free is pretty sweet.
Did want to one amendment about the interaction we suggested with Supergiant. So it won't actually work with MODOK if you sequence it that way, because if you'd play Hela on 6 and the MODOK's hit and the MODOK goes off afterwards, you'd need basically to do Corvus on 3, Supergiant on 4, then you play Hela on 5 and it's hidden, and then you play the MODOK. So be a little bit different than just slamming it like we said before. Worth pointing out. But yeah, Proxima's this is like she's like peanut butter and jelly, like with the Corvus. Like they're just relationship goals is what Ben Brode said, and it's true. Also, this got buffed to a 4/7.
Yep.
4/7s are really good, and especially when you're paying 0 mana for them. This goes back to the issue we had with the move stuff. One of the powerful things being done here is you get stats without having to pay cost for it. That's one of Destroy's strengths, right? You get a 0/12 if you did your thing. And this, you get a 0/7 if you did your thing. That's really good.
Yep.
0/7s are nothing to scoff at. That's and especially when, having another card like this provides really good redundancy in terms of getting stuff you want to discard in your hand. So that makes cards like Corvus better because you're not you're actually happy if this is discarded. Like, imagine that tempo swing. You play Corvus on 3 and you discard this. You paid 3 energy. You got 5 power, 7 power for free, and now you're an energy ahead. Like, that's a really huge swing. So I think this card's really strong, and the buff to 7 really helps her out a bit. So I think there's a lot of application here in both Hela and regular discard. Like, I think if discard is going to come back from the dead, like normal discard, they're sure giving it, every chance to have that happen this month. Like they're really trying to make it work.
I think this is the first month where I want all the cards.
Yeah, I kind of feel that this is the first month in a while. Like, I feel like January was kind of more boring, and even December, not all the cards, but I feel like a lot of the cards, they weren't super exciting to me in terms of like changing an existing archetype or making a new build around.
Yeah.
And these cards, yeah, I think these are a lot more exciting. I also really like that they interact with each other, which is kind of it's kind of a bad thing from the economy angle, right? Where it's like, oh, if you get Corvus and you can't get Proxima, you feel kind of bad because they go so well together. And that's been like a problem with Snap for a while, where it's like, if they want to make a new archetype or really juice a new archetype and you need multiple tools, you have to get the different cards. And
Yeah.
that can be tricky when it's all new cards, right? So downside from the economy angle, but from a gameplay and like fun perspective, if you can play with the cards, I think it's a lot more fun to have things that go well together. And I also think that improves the odds of them actually making an impact, right? Like if you're only giving discard one card, that card really needs to hit. And sometimes that card can be really good and it's still not enough to lift up the archetype because the rest of it is still being weighed down by the other cards. So yeah, I like what they're doing with this season. This is the most excited I've been for a season in a little bit.
At least since October, since Elsa.
Yeah. The Elsa season had a lot of bangers. Loki season had a lot of bangers too. It was just like the Loki
our head
cast
being-
the shadow
Yeah, it's
over
like
them
our head
all.
was banging the wall, not the cards being bangers. No, that's true. There were some interesting cards that month. So Nate, I have a question for you now. Having kind of heard all of this with respect to what the game state's looking like and where it's going. So you started a new job this week. Congratulations, by the way. We're all very happy for you. And so you haven't really had the time to play the game like that, like Zombies and I have. So do you know what you're going to do your Infinite Conquest with? Or are you even going to attempt Infinite Conquest after hearing us talk about how grindy it is? What are your plans for your end of season snap before reset? I think you're on mute there, Nate.
Oops, sorry. I've got 2 infinite tickets, and so I figure I may as well use them. I mean, I hate to convert them to random boosters, so I'll do it.
Yeah, the conversion rate's really, really bad.
Yeah,
the tickets are out.
I hit infinite this month with the Thanos Lockjaw. It's like I'm super comfortable playing it. I mean, I'm not as good as you all, but like, I mean, it's also hit infinite like week 1 with it, so it's not, I'm not bad with it. But it's a comfortable deck. It's easy to play. I need the boosters anyways, and so I'll probably play that. And then maybe destroy. I don't know, just because it's fun, and I want boosters for it. But I don't like. I got the cool Ghost Rider art card, and I got like most of the rewards that I wanted. So like, if I don't get an infinite border, like I don't care. But I just want to play what's comfortable and kind of fun. But I agree with the sentiment earlier. The difficult piece about Infinite Conquest is the time. Like, you got to pump 2 to 3 hours for sure, like into a run, and like I don't like doing that. The new job is awesome. I love it. It's a great company, great people, and they're paying me really well. And so I'm excited for it, but I also just came from having 4 months off, and so like it's been a huge adjustment to be getting up extra early and getting dressed in like normal clothes and driving into the office, and so I've been exhausted all week. But it's just an adjustment. But yeah, less time. I've been keeping up with my daily quests because I don't want to spend a lot of money on the game. But I don't want the daily, like the quest to lapse, right? Because they don't stack.
Yeah.
And so I've been sure to like do those every day. There's a really great 2099 variant in my shop right now, and like.
Oh, which one?
It's the like the white and red one. I don't know what it's. I could pull it up here, but the card is like it's kind of a stinker. So I'm not sure. I mean, maybe it's better now. I was watching.
If you
Zombies
like the move your opponent's stuff deck, it's really fun in that one. Like I don't think there's another deck where he's actually really worth playing. Like, I think he probably got worse in regular move, but I've always preferred that style. And 5/9s are just nice. 5/9s.
So I have no doubt that it's playable. I think Zombies' characterization of the card may be more generous than some, but
he likes it, and I can't. It's this guy here. This one's in my shop right now. It's kind of fun.
Oh, that's pretty cool.
I like it.
Oh yeah, I saw that one the other day. It's good. I got the Dan Hip one. It reminds me of him in the Spider-Verse movie, and I got the Spotlight too because I'm a true 2099 believer.
What I'm bummed at, so this week I got lucky and I got, well, this past week I should say, and I got Beta Ray Bill in Spotlight caches and I just opened them on the first one, which is great. But I like sitting here looking at, like you, Blue, I want all these cards for the next month. And so I'll get them, but ideally I'll get them through Spotlights. And I love the alternate art, like the ones that we were showing on the screen are their Spotlight art variants, and like that ain't happening. There's no way I'm opening up 5+ just to get those. Like,
Yeah, can we mention how there has been like no variants for like the new cards outside of Spotlights for like the past month and
There's
probably
a little
rest
bit
of
of
this
a
month?
little bit of a variant shortage for the new cards, like Kyera. Aside from the Spotlight, there's no variant.
All of
Same.
them this
come
month.
on.
I don't
Beta
think
Ray
any of
Bill
them.
has one, but it hasn't been released.
Mhm.
Yeah, it seems like the commissions for art or the time it takes to create all the different views, like inked gold and all the different finishes and animations, it's probably a lot of work. It sounds like a lot of work as I describe it. But yeah, there's been a little bit of a drought, so that's why I'm still happy to see that the battle pass has some real awesome variants, probably the best ones, because with a shortage, you know, there could be obviously a switcheroo done at the last minute to take them out of the battle pass and put them in the shop for 1,200 gold, and so that hasn't happened, and so I'm happy about that. But yeah, hopefully when we get our next patch next week,
Yeah,
we'll
Tuesday
be
should be the patch for the new season.
yeah.
Patches usually bring a few random changes in them, but I wouldn't expect too much because, as we know, they like to do like actual like balancing based on what's going on in the OTAs. So probably just maybe tweaking if there are any main effects they want to change, but I don't really think they're going to change very much. I think the vast majority of players right now are pretty happy with the meta. I think that it is. I've seen this is the least I've seen people complain about like the state of the meta game probably in like half a year. So like that's pretty good. And it's not going to be perfect for everyone. Some people are always going to dislike it, and that's fair. But for me, I've had a lot more fun with the game recently. I like that there is a wide variety of decks that you can be played, especially on ladder. Like Conquest, we talked about the issues with the Conquest, but I've had a lot more fun playing just regular on ladder, and I've seen a ton of different people climb with these different off meta brews, and that's always preferable to seeing everyone playing the same deck like we saw before the blob change or before the Loki change and whatnot.
Well, when we come back in 2 weeks to talk about our Snap experiences, a number of these cards will be out, and the
Yeah.
effects will have been felt on the meta. So I'm looking forward to talking about that. And as the month comes to a close, hopefully you have a good run or two and get your portrait there, Nate. And yeah.
Yeah,
I
I
think
appreciate it. We'll see what happens. I'll give it a go, but I'm also not like holding my breath.
that's the best mentality to go into
Yeah.
Infinity Conquest with, not giving any expletives about the outcome, because you could play your best game and the locations don't fall your way, or you queue into a hard counter, or man, this has kind of been the experience this month. You queue into players that seem like they're going to make logical choices and then do something completely out of left field, and trying to like account for that can be really maddening, especially when it's an even chance to occur. So if you go in with no expectations, then you won't be upset when the cards, so to speak, don't fall in the way that you would like, because I think that can happen to anyone, regardless of skill level. Of course, you shouldn't blame mistakes or misplays on luck and variance, but you also shouldn't hold yourself accountable or be unkind to yourself on your performance when you had no agency over the outcome as well. So there's a balance there, and not having an expected outcome can help with that. Really easy for me to say, generally difficult for me to do, but I seem to be more successful when I'm in that state of mind, as opposed to the, oh my God, I need to accomplish, X.
Yeah.
So for example, my goal for Infinite Conquest every month is I want to go through one Infinite Conquest a month, right? That's my goal, and play seriously, not just like, doing the math, trying to figure out the proper lines, etc. That's to do that once a month. If I get the portrait, awesome. If I don't, well, I did my best, but at least I tried. That's the goal. And yeah, it's difficult to set realistic goals for oneself. I remember someone said this about streaming. It might have been Martian Boo or Corbett. I can't recall. But when you set goals for your streams, like you want to have X amount of follows by date Y, you have no control over that. So your goals should be in line with things that you do have control over. Like, I'm going to stream to a set schedule, or
Yeah.
I'm
Good
going
advice.
to create X video. That is good advice for most things in life, right? Because things that you don't have control over, that you feel either expected or entitled to, it makes that letdown even more difficult. Again, very easy to say, very difficult to live by. But that's kind of been my mindset with Snap and gaming in general over the last couple of months. For those that don't know, I can tend to get a little angry when I play games. But going in with this mindset has really helped with that. At least I'd like to think so. You tell me, Zombies. We co-op a lot over the years, so have you seen any
Oh, I'd say you've had a lot of
progress?
improvement with that, especially since the Hearthstone days.
Yeah,
I remember the Hearthstone days, and I've been there too, and I still am there sometimes with Snap. But yeah, I think it doing what you can to have a more positive mindset not only will make you have a better time, but I also think makes you a better player. Like, it's a real skill to be able to kind of keep those emotions in check, or learn from something when something doesn't go your way, and also learn to recognize the difference between when this is like a big one for Infinity Conquest. Winning 5 in a row is hard. You see the Twitter posts, and it makes it like, I think makes it feel like it's such a given, or people think it's like easier than it is, but it's a lot of people work really hard just to get that one border, and like,
yeah.
people should enjoy that accomplishment. And it's a tricky thing, but
I really like that you post not only your successful runs, but also you talk about your unsuccessful runs on your social media as well. And I applaud that, because it does offer more of a balanced perspective. But I also know that the engagement factor is always lower on those types of posts. But
yeah, it's generally true. But
but
it's nice to show people it's like, yeah, when people only see the times you win, you know what it's like? It's like when somebody is they're betting on a stock, or they're sports betting or whatever. They always talk about the times they win, right?
yeah.
But they don't talk about the times they don't. So it paints this picture of, oh wow, this person's really successful, or this person's really good at what they're doing. But it's like, you don't know, that could have been their one success compared to like 4 failures for that month, but you just didn't hear about it, so you don't know.
It's why I
Right.
hate LinkedIn so much. Like, everyone's rich and happy and successful on LinkedIn, and it's like, no, that's not the real world. Just like, the reality is that people that have a lot of portraits, like you do, Zombies, or like Revis, the Portrait King,
Yeah, Revis and
know,
Lambie have tons. Like,
yeah,
I feel like I have a lot. I think I have like
but they
14 or 15, but
they
they have a
they
ton.
probably will do more Infinite Conquest runs in a month than I'll do in my entire life.
Yeah,
So
that's also fair.
yeah, so I think that that's an important thing to keep in mind as well. That good play is important, but it's a grind, right? And you need to go through that grind, because for every portrait that someone obtains, 5 people did not. And that's a spread. And I think that
Even
it's
more than 5 people, right? Because like, uh, you people like, there's always a loser in each game, right?
Right. Yeah. I
But
guess.
people don't
Yeah.
make it to. Most people aren't even making it to 5,
Yeah.
right? So it's like it's
Minimum. Yeah.
And the other big thing is like, well, you shouldn't discount like luck and whatnot. Anyone who says there isn't a real amount of luck involved with like over the broader like number of games, there is luck involved specifically with matchmaking because there isn't
Yeah.
any parameters for matchmaking in Infinity Conquest compared to the lower tiers where it does seem to use MMR, collection level, other factors to matchmake you. Somehow, I always run into a handful of Pool 2 players in Infinity Conquest. And I mean, I guess that's probably a good thing for the game because they're getting new players playing the game because no one's willingly playing a Pool 2 only deck when they're, have access to other cards. But it's also like you can win with a deck that might not be very good if you happen to queue into a bunch of really not good decks or players. And I think that's not to devalue the experience. It's just to say that not all wins are created equal in Infinity
No.
Conquest. So
My
don't stress about it too
my
much.
portrait this month falls into that category. I mean, I think it was game 3 where I basically like made a misplay and put a generated sentry void into a lane that I decided I wanted to actually compete in and forgot that a
no.
void was going there because it was behind a dark dimension. Like that kind of mistake should have ended my run. But like because the person I was playing against was maybe a newer opponent or maybe someone new to Conquest. They didn't capitalize on it, and I was able to brush it off like nothing. But like, I mean, you can get really tough opponents like back to back to back, and it's exhausting. And sometimes it's like you get pool 2 gamers front to back, and there's so much variance in Infinity Conquest. So if you're frustrated that you haven't gotten a portrait yet, the only advice that I could really offer is to keep getting Infinity tickets and keep going through that gauntlet, and eventually you'll come through the other side with the prize. And it's a pretty sweet prize. I like my Infinity borders.
Yeah, me too.
They're shiny.
They're fun. Yeah, it's nice. It's a nice little accomplishment thing. And they're not going to sell them. There was a question someone was asking. I think someone had too many, losses and was getting frustrated and was just like, I'm over this. I just want to buy it. And they were like, no, we're not going to do that.
That's good.
Yeah.
That's good to know. I mean, I assume that would be the case, but it's reassuring to hear.
You never know in mobile
Yeah.
gaming, right?
You never know. Well, that takes us to the bottom of our agenda. Plus, we had a little bit of a segue at the end too. We seem to be unexpectedly ahead of schedule. Was there any other topics that you guys wanted to touch upon before we wrap?
Not too much off the top of my head. I've just been. It's nice to see that we have gotten to a point where things feel a bit more varied again, and it doesn't feel like there's just one deck dominating the whole game.
Yeah.
I feel like we went through a lot of that the last few months, and they have told us like, hey, yeah, we're working on it. I think they kind of know that things weren't exactly optimal for the last few seasons, and I guess we're starting to see a little bit of that extended testing make its way through, right? Specifically with Black Swan, where someone asked about why they went with 3-5 over 2-3, and they were like, yeah, well, when we were testing it, 2-3 just felt like it wasn't being impactful enough. So it's nice to see that happen before the card releases rather than like, it's nice they're willing to change cards after, but obviously the goal is to get it right on the first try, so it doesn't need a nerf or a buff at all, right?
Agreed.
Easier said than done, but it's nice when they can hit that mark. And I think that at least with the stuff we've seen in the current season, I feel like a lot of the cards are kind of looking like that. Like, I feel like it's hard to evaluate cards. They could be better, they could be worse, who knows? But
they look fun
I feel
nonetheless.
yeah, it looks exciting without like, I'm not looking at any of the stuff here and like kind of dreading it a bit because it looks so overpowered. It just looks like, yeah, these are fun cards that I can imagine probably we'll see play. And it's really all you want out of a card game, right? Is you just want to be able to interact with the cards.
I have one thing.
Mm-hmm.
Let's finish up with new albums. They released.
Oh yeah, we should talk about that.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, so they showed them in the trailer. And so albums are interesting. When they released, there was a whole ton of controversy surrounding them. People were upset that, and this was such a easily this is such a thing that they could have done a few small different things and could have completely changed the perception around it. But they didn't, and now they're learning from it and hopefully going to improve it. So the issue was they showed off emotes and people were excited about emotes. And then people couldn't get the emotes without having to buy a bunch of variants, some of which they probably didn't want. And that felt pretty bad. And understandably, when people see a thing advertised in the season trailer and then feel like they can't interact with that new feature, it's kind of one of those hey, this isn't really for me. And that feels bad kind of moments. And so they heard feedback about albums. Supposedly albums have actually been very successful from what I've heard. I mean, you kind of want that to succeed because it's monetizing the game through cosmetics. And one can hope that helps keep prices down, whether that's lowering them in the future or making it so they don't have to go up. You want to see them succeed in monetizing cosmetics. And but they admitted we could have done some things to make them more positively received. And so this is their first step in doing that. Last month, we got 1 album for the month. This month, we're getting 4 albums, 1 a week. And you might notice 2 of them are pixel albums. And I think this is a great thing because
everyone's got a million pixels.
Yeah, everyone has a lot of pixels, or a lot of people have a lot of pixels. And while I don't anticipate players are going to go out of their way to necessarily finish all these unless you really like the emotes, I'm excited for it because I own a bunch of destroy and discard pixels. So I'm going to get some free rewards for stuff that otherwise was just collecting dust in my collection. And that's nice. You get some tokens or a spotlight key or another variant or whatever. And hey, anything helps. Free is for me. We also have a confirmation that one of these albums is going to be under 12 things to complete. I imagine it's going to be the low cost, high impact one because lower cost, smaller album. It's just my guess. So we get some new emotes with that. And then Art Germ is going to be the shop takeover of the month. So there are going to be some new Art Germs that are probably going to be in the album to complete that one.
They're going to cost $2,400.
Oh God, don't give them ideas. I'm not really big on the emotes personally. I don't think they're bad or anything. They're just not really for me. I like the Wolverine one the best. So if I happen to have enough destroy pixels for that, cool. But they're really hard pressed to ever come up with a better emote than that Cosmo emote for me.
Yeah, that's so I got the Cosmo avatar now with the Cosmo card back with the Keep It Cosmo emote. And
you're all Cosmoed out. That's perfect.
I'm all Cosmoed out now. Yeah, I was pretty happy with that portrait. Yeah, none of these emotes seem worth chasing, although that's good because then that FOMO, I won't feel compelled to pick up variants I don't want for something that seems like truly is a nice extra. So I'm cool with it. Although funny enough, I have all 3 of the variants for the album for Pixel, Discard, Destroy, and low cost, high impact. So maybe I will have a couple. Maybe I'll get some of the middle of the road prizes, which would be kind of neat. Tokens or credits or avatars or whatever. So yeah, we'll see.
All helps, right? Yeah, anything helps. And I think making more accessible albums is a great way to go. I don't think anyone had a complaint the fact that they were locking some stuff behind people buying stuff. That's fine. They have to make money. But I think the big issue was it felt like there was only one small group of things to interact with and not things for, other players just casually earn over time, especially with how many of the albums have 1,200 gold ones. With these pixel ones, even if you don't ever buy a pixel, you're getting those randomly over time. So I think that helps a lot. And also, I imagine it's not coming soon, but they did also talk about having parent albums, which I think was the biggest misfire on release. Was not at least entertaining the idea of doing that, which is, hey, we can have a big album for all the Dan Hips or all the variants that have a whole lot of them. And you can that way, because one of the biggest complaints, right, was, hey, I have 80 Dan Hips and I have 5 of these album ones. It's what the heck? Why do I have so few when I own so many hips? And that was frustrating to people. So I think having a larger, plus just from a collecting aspect, if you're trying to reward people for collecting, don't you want to reward the people who've gone out of their way to get every single thing? Or and if nothing else, you're enticing some more people to do that who maybe otherwise wouldn't have. So it seems like an easy win, and I don't imagine it's going to come soon, because thinking about that is actually like a lot of work given how many variants for some of these cards there are. For like Dan Hips specifically, there are a ton of Dan Hips. So I imagine a parent album will be really big, and then you have the issue of you have to constantly update it, right? Because they're going to be releasing new ones. So I think it's a challenging project. I don't expect to see it happen very quickly, but it does sound like it's something they want to do. So I hope it's something they do, because that I think would also help with the one of the big complaints about albums, which is, hey, I own a lot of the stuff, but I just don't happen to own these specific ones, and maybe I don't really want them, and it feels kind of bad.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Well, we can expect to see those land on Tuesday with the new patch, so it'll be interesting to see what's included there. So good call on bringing that up, Nate.
Oh yeah, thanks.
Yeah, so that takes us to the bottom of the show. I want to thank everyone that came in from the Lambie raid and then the Zombies raid to watch the podcast live.
Yeah, thank you so much.
It's always
it was a
fun
lot of
doing it
fun.
live. And for those that are listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, thank you as well. Much appreciated. We love to share our opinions and thoughts on the game with you. And yeah, looking forward to the new season, regrouping in 2 weeks' time and hearing how those initial games have been with a new shifting meta. So until then, be kind to everyone out there and keep it Cosmo. We'll see you in 2 weeks.
Keep it Cosmo.
Keep it Cosmo.
Enough said, bub.